The Powers Project.
Tiffany, how are you today, young lady?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining me today. With school starting back up, I wanted to have a teacher on, and I realized that you don't speak for all teachers, obviously, but I wanted to get a teacher's point of view with school starting back here in the next couple of weeks of what it's like and what goes through your head with the new year starting, and with all the things that you have to deal with as a teacher. I mean, we talk about things like unruly students, unruly parents, woke teachers, horrible pay. And on top of all that, you know, uh, in the past, we've had so many of these school shootings that I can't help but think that this must weigh on your mind at some point and your colleagues' mind. And so I wanted to have you on today to get your point of view of things and how you feel, how your colleagues feel if you talk about it and things like that. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Of course.
I've decided to keep your identity secret only because for safety reasons. So we won't be talking about what school you teach at or give out your last name or anything like that because I don't want anybody who might um, not be of sound mind to think, oh, this is where I should go or this is what I should do next um, to find some sort of fame or whatever they're looking for. So for your safety, I've chosen to keep it uh, private. Okay.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Okay. So why don't you tell the listeners and the viewers how long have you been teaching?
This is actually, I'm going into my fourth year. I started quite late. I've done a lot of other things in my life, but teaching is definitely my calling. But this is year four that I'm going into.
So do you feel like for yourself and probably with many other teachers that you said this is my calling? So is this something that you're just so passionate about that despite the fact of of having to deal with students that they're so different, they're so different from when I was a kid and even from the time my kids went to school, which are probably your age. Do you see that difference and do you see how things have regressed, if you or digressed, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when I do talk to my colleagues who've been teaching for 20, 30 years, um, we really dealt with the last school year. A lot of them said this might be the worst group I've ever dealt with, and we deal with that quite a bit. I hear the next group's better, but we just have there are a lot of changes, a lot of differences when it comes to the way kids respect adults, the lack of just discipline in general. The TikTok age is what I like to call it.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. Do you think that's a big part of reason why kids are so disrespectful? That I know, like, there's such an emphasis put on money nowadays. Like, if you don't make X amount of dollars, they have no respect for you. And I think, and this has been going on for decades, actually. Where it's if a parent makes more than a teacher, and the kid goes, "Well, you don't make as much as my dad, so who are you to tell me what to do?" and things of that nature, as if money is the end all be all to wisdom or to any type of authority.
Yeah, I actually, when it comes to that, I don't, I actually, the parents that I deal with on the whole are very respectful. The issue I have is more with the subject I teach. So many people, adults, look back and say, I don't use math. So I don't use the math that they're learning. I don't know how to help you. And so they tell their kids, I'm bad at math. I don't understand what you're doing, so I can't help you. And so the kids come in and say, my parents don't use it, so why do I need to learn it? So that is more the side that I deal with. As parents making more, I work in a pretty most of my students, they're pretty well off. Their families are pretty well off. And I never really deal with that issue that I see so far. I
Right.
do teach a lot of honors kids. So.
Oh, that's good. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, because I would be one of those parents that would come to you and go, "Hey, look, this math is way above my pay grade." So I don't know. I wouldn't know how to help my kids either. So in that situation, what do you tell the parents? Like, what do you do to get the kid help if they need help? If the parents are, because I would be useless. I'm like, if you don't put a dollar sign in the front of it, I'm not going to be able to figure it out. So
Yeah, we actually have a lot of resources here, and most schools do. Our department really goes above and beyond as a whole anyway. I come in every morning. I'm actually at the school now, but I'm usually here by like 6:30 every morning. We don't start school till 8:50 now. So if the kids want to come in at 7:30, I'll help them out. I'm in the school, it doesn't matter. I don't mind. And we have online tutoring that's free. If you're an athlete, we have athletic tutoring in the morning. We have athletic tutoring 6 hours. So we have a lot of options and a lot of help for our kids. So that's what we always just send the parents a list of resources that we can offer at the school. And then it's up to the parent to get their kid the help they need.
okay. And I think a lot of times, people who complain about teachers and say, oh, they don't deserve any more money because they get 3 months off. I don't think they realize you really don't get 3 months off, and that you're putting in so many more hours than they could fathom. And not only that, but I know many teachers who actually take money out of their own pockets to provide materials for their students, because their families can't provide for them or whatever, and the school doesn't provide for them. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that.
I think some people are aware of it, but I think a lot of people are aware because we do talk about it. But many people say, why? Why do you do it? You don't have to. But why are we teachers? Why did we decide to be teachers? Yes, we knew going in that we weren't going to make a ton of money. So what kind of people are becoming teachers? Are the people that want to help. And so we're not gonna tell a kid tough luck. It's just not gonna happen. I mean, there might be some teachers, but I'm not one of them. I spent $150 at Walmart this morning, so on school supplies. So that's just what we do.
Okay, so while we're on the subject of teachers, just for a second, and I don't want to go deep into it, but have you heard the term of these woke teachers?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually big. There's an article right now in Oklahoma talking about that.
Okay. And so what's your take on it? Or would you rather not say?
No, I don't mind. As a math teacher, and this is what I tell people when we talk about it, as a math teacher, I find that I'm extremely lucky and I would not want to teach. I would never want to teach English. And history, I think, is also I'm certified in history, but I feel like that's also a very touchy subject. I love in math. My kids come in here talking about politics. I was here during the last election. I was teaching and kids talking about politics. I told them to leave it at the door. I didn't have to talk about anything. My kids don't know anything about my opinions, and they shouldn't. In my classroom as a math teacher.
Right.
I've had some really great teachers in my life that got us really talking about these topics, these difficult topics, and I never knew what their opinions were. They just felt they were very neutral, and I loved that. But I find that it's two-sided. There's some issues on both sides. I think depending on where you are, you're right. There's woke teachers, but then there's also the other side, and they're not as policed.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Well,
so I think that at least in certain areas of the country, I'm sure, but I think that there's a double standard a little bit there. I think that we should, as teachers, our job is to teach them everything we can, not necessarily our opinion.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Again, I go back to when I was in school. You know, teachers didn't talk about their life, their religion, their politics. That wasn't part of the school curriculum. It was never brought into the classroom, and as students, we didn't bring ours in either. And so I find it very strange that there are teachers out there now who feel this need to talk about themselves, which I find to be, somewhat narcissistic at the very least, and to talk to their students about them. And it's not about them; it's about the students. And I don't know how that gets lost in
Well, I'll tell you, we're trained as teachers generally, and there's studies done on it. Apparently, I haven't seen the studies, but it seems to work. The more your students know about you, the more that they'll open up to you. So, and that's the goal. The goal is, especially, I know in math, kids shut down to their teachers if they don't trust their teacher, if they don't know their teacher. And so I talk about my life all the time. My kids know everything about my life, not everything about, they don't know my opinions. They know they know about my family. They know about my pets. They know about the things I do for fun. That those are things that the schools now train us to make sure that your kids know about you. And so it's not necessarily narcissistic, but kids don't trust people that they don't know. And if your kids get to know you on a more personal level, then they're going to trust you more.
So what is the all right, so help me out here, because as a teacher, what is it that you need them to trust you for other than to learn the subject matter that you're teaching? I mean, if you're teaching math, and obviously, the problems that you solve are solved properly, I'd go, okay, she knows what she's talking about. I need to listen to her. I don't know that I need to find something to know about you, to trust you, to know that you know your subject matter. Does that make sense? I mean, I know that we have guidance.
That does make sense. It does make sense, but you've I work with teenagers. Teenagers they're very, it's not a child, it's not a little child that says, oh, this adult knows what they're talking about. Or this adult isn't going to hurt me. This adult isn't going to do something as teenagers get very untrusting. And so if you don't get to know your kids on a more personal level, then it's just another class. They're just sitting there doing, oh, here's a problem, figure it out. But I don't know how to explain it exactly, but school is going in a different direction. It's more about the atmosphere, because they're realizing that students don't open up their minds. They're not open to learning.
Okay, so if I may interject here just for a second. Again, I go back to when I was in school. I had an English teacher. In fact, I had two English teachers. Oh, I just did not like them. And because of it, I didn't learn as much as I could have and should have in their classes.
It's a better explanation.
It wasn't because of the subject matter, and it wasn't because I didn't trust them. It's because they were just very disciplinarian, strict, the old school type teachers that, I say you did this and then you do this. And they made the class very boring. I had history teachers and science teachers that I learned so much from because they were so passionate about the subject matter that they taught, and that they made it a fun class and exciting. But none of these teachers did I know their personal background. I didn't know if they had pets. I didn't know if they were married. I didn't know if they're gay or straight or anything. And I didn't need to, because they brought the passion that they had for the subject matter that they were teaching, and they made it fun and exciting for the students. And I found that's what the students are looking for: someone who can make you engage you into that subject matter to where you feel like you're part of it, and you want to learn about it. So I don't
So I
think,
guess my question is, why can't we have both?
because I think what happens is this, when I talk about woke teachers, for instance, right now there's this matter with, in Florida, we had a law passed talking about the left called it the don't say gay bill. Okay. And that's not what it was. Now, and this is coming from me, who is a gay man. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
telling you, that's not what it was saying. What it was saying is that you don't have the right to sit there and tell people about your non-binary or your sex life or anything else, especially with kids from it was the ages of 5 to, it was
Young children. Mm-hmm.
12. Yes, young children. They're not even thinking about this stuff. And for you to start confusing children and saying, "Oh, well, you can use different pronouns," is just absolutely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that you may be trans, you may consider yourself to be non-binary, you can consider yourself whatever you want to consider yourself, but that you don't need to push that on to children
Mm-hmm.
that aren't even thinking in those realms. And again, I go back to my days. I didn't know any of these things. Like, the teachers would never thought to talk to us about things like that. And yet I remember, even in elementary school, Mrs. Homer and Mrs. Moyer, my second and third grade teachers. I remember them because I loved them, because they were such kind people. And that's what I remember about them, not
Mm-hmm.
who they were married to, not what pets they had, not religion they were, not what pronoun they went by or anything like that. And so I just don't see the need to push that, because here's the issue I think that we have, is that when these woke teachers think it's okay that we should be able to tell them about, different pronouns and things of this nature, to me it's no different than forcing kids to listen to your religious points of view, saying, "Oh, well, I'm Catholic or I'm Baptist and I go to this church and I go to this church and I believe this and I believe that." It's, if a teacher did that, they would be up in arms about it, but they don't see the correlation there of what they're doing is basically the same thing. I mean, would you agree or not?
Yeah, I would to a point. And actually, that's what I was saying about, I think there's a double standard in some ways,
Right.
because you see people will push those things. And I think that there's certain things that you need to be aware of. I know that I have conversations with students all the time. Students want to talk to you. They want to have those conversations. They will ask you questions. When a kid asks me, "Are you married?" I'm not going to tell them no. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to be like, "That's none of your business. That's rude." You talk about your life, because kids want to know. And so, I mean, or kids will come to you and they'll ask for advice. They trust us as teachers, so they want. And remember, we have to remember that there's a reason I don't teach elementary school, and I never would. Okay. So I am a high school teacher. These kids are fully aware of all of what is going on in the
Right.
world. I mean, they're on TikTok. It's more that side. I see TikTok teaching kids more than parents and teachers do these days. And so when kids are coming in, they'll ask us questions about those things. If I don't feel comfortable, I'll tell them I don't feel comfortable talking about that.
Right.
But when I have a kid that is clearly, he's gay pride, and he's talking to me about my life, I'll gladly tell him, "Yeah, my brother's gay," so that he feels more comfortable around me. Absolutely. I'll tell him that. I have no issue with that. But, and if it makes another child feel uncomfortable, they're already sitting next to a kid that is out and proud. You know what I mean? I mean,
And see,
it is what it is.
and what you do, I don't have any problem with that. I think that if a child comes to you, or if a teenager comes to you and wants to talk about these things or ask you questions, I don't think that there's any problem with addressing the questions that they have, because they do trust you. They do want to have a connection. I mean, I think most students want to have a connection with their teacher so they can enjoy knowing that they're going to enjoy coming to that class, and it
Exactly.
helps when they enjoy the teacher that's who's teaching. What I don't agree with is the purpose the purposeful, or excuse me, the purposely um, grooming
Pushing.
kids and forcing it down their throats and telling them about things they're not even asking about, because especially young kids, because again, they're not even thinking about this stuff. These aren't teenage kids.
No,
And
I
so
agree.
and so when this law was passed, it was to protect these younger children. And like I said, I don't even know if it went up to the age of 12, but I know that's I'm pretty sure that's the max age it went up to, like
I
5 to
think it was
12.
younger.
Yeah, to keep the younger kids, from talking about sex at all. I mean, you shouldn't be talking about straight sex, gay sex, or any sex at that age. So that's the issue I have with these woke teachers, and they're so militant in their actions of and wanting to force this down these kids'
And I'm
throat.
not going to deny I've met teachers like this, and I disagree with it. I disagree with the way that you're going to force something down a child's, onto a child, because
Right.
in my opinion, this is just how it is, especially at the age that we're teaching. Um, there were studies done, and I do not know the percentage, so I'm not going to try to remember it, but it was a very high percentage of kids that completely believe exactly as their parents do. You're not going to change those kids' opinions. It's just the way it is. So why try? You just need
Well,
to accept other people's opinions and let them grow and teach them how to think critically on their own. And that's your job. It's not to tell them what to think, it's to teach them to think critically. And that's what's important as teachers.
well, I think the danger is that I agree with you. It's not so much that they're going to change these kids' opinions. What they're doing is they're confusing the kids. And then if kids get any type of notoriety, any type of attention, by going, well, I want to be called they, them, and then everyone else goes, well, I want to be called they, them, because the teacher likes when she can or he can call you they, them. When you see a positive response from the teacher because, one or more kids buy into their philosophy, then they show favoritism towards those kids. Well, kids are going to automatically go, well, I want to be that too, because I don't want to be left out. And so I think there's a danger there when
Well,
we allow that to happen.
in my experience, and like I said, I'm only going to year 4, but I have had a few students that have asked me to call them by a different pronoun, by a different name, but in my experience, I haven't seen that other kids have been influenced by that. But I teach high school. I'd say the middle school years are probably the most formative years. So those would be the years that you're going to probably be more worried about.
Right.
But these kids in my classes, they most of them have an identity by the time they get here. They're starting to really form into their own identity, and they are. But like I said, I've had a few, and in my experience, though, they don't get extra attention because they've asked me to call them by a different pronoun or by something else, because it's just like asking, my name is Alexandra, I want to be called Alex, so I call that person Alex, and then another person wants to be called Tony, but it's a female, I just call him Tony. I mean, you just call them by whatever name they want to be called, and then but you don't make a deal of it, you don't do anything else. I run it by the parent, but if they want to be called by a different name, I just call them by a different name or a different pronoun.
Yeah, the difference is that you're not trying to groom these kids, but when
Yeah.
you have these teachers who are trying to groom these kids, so someone comes to you and says, I go by the pronouns they, them, you go, okay, no big deal, and you don't make a big deal out of it.
Right.
But when you have a teacher who is happy that you go by they, them, because that's what they're pushing, and they do show that favoritism, that's where the danger lies. It doesn't lie within teachers like you who go, okay, that's who you are, that's what you want to be, fine, I don't have any issues with that. But when you start pushing that on kids, and again, these kids see how happy it makes the teacher when they buy into it, and that the teacher shows favoritism towards that child because they feel like, oh, they're one of us. It does set a precedence where where kids will start going, I want to be part of that. And I know that, especially in young girls, that there's been, several studies done, who these young girls who said that, they wanted that um, they wanted to transition, that they felt like they were boys, that an overwhelming majority of them regret the fact that they said that or did that anything to transition, because they were just going through a phase, because girls want to be accepted by other girls and they don't want to be left out of the crowd. And if that's the trend that's going at that point in time, they're going to be part of it. As a woman, being a girl back in those days, would you say that's pretty accurate?
I would say so. I was a very different kind of kid.
Well, that's
But
true too.
but yeah, I mean, I see it absolutely. I was so committed to. I was an athlete, and I was so committed, and there was just no way of. I wasn't really easily swayed by other people.
Right.
But a lot of peer pressure is always a thing. It doesn't matter what it is. You say that people regret that. Kids also regret. I mean, they regret smoking. They regret.
Right.
I mean, you can go as far as that. I drank and I was drinking and driving, and we got in an accident, and my friend died. I mean, it can be. Teenagers do things that they regret because of peer pressure, and it doesn't matter what it is. You're going to be dealing with it
See,
and regretting that.
you make a very good point. You make a great point, in fact, and that's one of the things where I talk about. I'm dead set against kids getting hormone therapy or or surgeries done at such an early age, because they don't know what they want. And can you imagine if you put a kid on hormone therapy and it's irreversible, and all of a sudden a girl who thought she wanted to be a boy because that was what was going on and that was what she was pressured into doing, that she's no longer ever going to be able to get her voice back, that she's going to have a more manly voice, that she's going to have to shave the beard off her face, she's going to have she's going to have these male characteristics that she's never going to be able to get rid of again, and it's going to affect her for the rest of her life. And that's these things are so permanent, that and so damaging if done to the wrong people, that I just believe that we should take some time, there's to where they grow up to be adults, and where they can make this decision as an adult rather than making it as a child. We don't let children make decisions about many things, and this is such a permanent thing that can affect their lives for the rest of their lives. I truly believe, just like we don't allow them to drink, we don't allow them to do drugs, we don't allow them to smoke, we don't allow them to do those things because they're damaging. And so wait till you get to become an adult, then you can mess yourself up if you want.
I think it's very difficult because it's I think it's a very difficult, very, very difficult thing, because I mean, you look back at even the 90s, early 2000s, even people were saying that that children were coming out, or teenagers were coming out as gay, and that was for attention. But it's all very, very difficult because it is hormone related, a lot of it. And so when you look at brain development, really, should we even be making any decisions till we're 25, 26 years old? Really,
Right.
probably not. But but 18-year-olds think they're adults. And are they? I mean, really, can they make those big decisions? I mean, that's what's difficult with all of this, is because it's less brain development, more hormone related.
Right.
What happens when those hormone levels level out, and they're, I mean, when you're 13, 14, 15 years old, your hormones are way up. And so it's a very difficult time in kids' lives. And I think that if a parent is willing to let a child go that far, I think that a lot of therapy would be needed, a lot of talking to real professionals that are in that field, because I don't know what that feels like. I was a tomboy as a kid, but
Right.
I never ever felt like that I should have been I should be a different gender. I don't know how that feels. And I've actually speaking to people that feel that way, it's a fine line. It's something I wouldn't do. I would recommend therapy or
Right.
people in the field that know how to deal with it.
I agree. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in that field who are experts in the field who've been silenced because they have spoken out against, you know, allowing hormone therapy at such an early age or surgeries at such an early age. And they've been called transphobes and stuff, because this militant group who's pushing this agenda, who aren't even trans people, are, they're looking to push their agenda, and they don't care how many kids get hurt in the process. And unfortunately, these experts aren't allowed to speak up for fear of losing their jobs. And so there's this conundrum that we're caught in to go, okay, so what therapists are going to be able to talk to them? The only ones who agree to allow them with this therapy. And so I agree with you. I think that, because again, I know that there are trans kids out there who know for a fact that they are trans. Unfortunately, I don't believe that that's the majority of these kids, because the percentages have skyrocketed, and there's no way that many people came out and go, and just because it's accepted and people come out and go, oh, I'm trans now, like they said about gay people, because there are more gay people because it's been more widely accepted. So I understand that. And I knew I was
Then
gay.
you could argue that that's the reason there's more trans.
Right, but it's not, because
Just devil's advocate.
we're not talking about a few percentage points. We're talking about hundreds of percentage points, and in females, which when we talk about people coming out as trans, the majority of them were men to women, not women to men, and so there's this it's unbalanced. It's not, the percentages don't figure out. Even when gay people came out more, it wasn't like some huge number. It did spike our numbers up a little, but not much. Being gay, I knew I was gay at a very early age, but there wasn't anything that needed to take place on my part that could harm me later on in life. I didn't have to transition to become gay. I just was. So I understand the difficulties, but I think it's better to be safe than to be sorry and ruin some child's life who just thought, again, because we don't ever hear about girls, like you said, you were a tomboy. We never hear that anymore. If you're a tomboy, then it's like, oh, well, you might be lesbian, or oh, you might be trans. It's like, or she might just be a tomboy.
My daughter's a tomboy, so yeah, I mean, it's a thing.
So yeah, all right. So enough about that. I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, before you became a teacher, you were well aware of school shootings because they've been going on for quite some time now. Did that ever influence your decision to become a teacher? Like, was it ever a thought, or you just like, nope, this is what I'm supposed to do?
No, really hasn't ever been a thought in my mind. I was a social worker before I was a teacher, so I was always a lot more worried in that job than I ever had been as a teacher.
I can imagine.
Going into people's homes is a lot. See, especially if you're telling them that they're not fit to be a parent. That's a lot more dangerous, I feel, and daily, than being a teacher. So
you kind of came from a background where you were accustomed to that threat level, if you will, that danger.
yes.
So what about the teachers that you work with? I mean, do you guys ever talk amongst each other? Do they have more concerns? Are they more anxious than you because they didn't have that type of job to prepare them for what's going on nowadays?
No, I actually think about this often, but with all the shootings going on lately, not just in school, but anywhere, is I always think about what they were thinking right before, because no one ever thinks it's going to happen. It just happens that fast. So you don't really think about it we aren't trained per se. Teachers aren't trained well for that situation. We do have little tips and tricks that I talk to my colleagues about, and we're like, oh, okay, well, I've talked to this person, or somebody's talked to a police officer and they say that this is the best option and this is what we should do in a case like that. And we all kind of take those if anything were to happen. I think that what we were talking about before about making connections with your students, I think that that's extremely important. And I think that that's part of the reason that we feel safe a lot of times in our classrooms, is because we all try to make those connections with students, and hoping that if it is a student that is planning something to that effect, that hopefully we can make an impact on their lives enough that they know that they're loved and they're seen, so that something like that doesn't happen in our classrooms. It's the hope, anyway.
Do you have security in your school? Do you have security?
Minimal. We do. Unfortunately, with our campus, we have an open campus. We have to, because like I said, I'm a high school teacher. We have a separate 9th grade center and high school, and our high school has multiple buildings, so there has to be an open campus. So it wouldn't be too terribly difficult for someone to come onto campus, but we do have security. Unfortunately, I think the local police officers, they're SROs, they come in and they'll be there if we need them, but it's not regular security now.
Okay, so when you talk amongst yourselves, like, there's been this whole thought by mostly the Republicans, I believe, who think that we should arm teachers. How do your colleagues feel about that? And what are your thoughts on if you were told, hey, you have to carry a gun to school?
Yeah, so like I said, if it was foolproof, great. I would do whatever I needed to do to protect the students, to protect us. But here's the issue. One, we have to have a safe in our classroom, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We would have to have a safe. I think of a situation where somebody comes into the school and they start shooting. How many teachers have time to go over to their safe, open up their safe, get the gun out, load the gun, because we can't really keep it loaded in there, right? Load the gun. And would that really save lives? I just wonder. And then 2, looking back at elementary schools, do you want, I mean, or even high school, what happens if a kid gets in that safe somehow?
Right.
Really, I mean, I think that we would probably see the percentage that I saw it somewhere, but they said that there is such a low percentage that your school is going to be the one that's hit. It really is. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of schools across the country. Yeah, it seems like it's a really high percentage because it is higher than it used to be, but it's still such a low percentage that it's going to be your school. And I just feel like we would have a lot more accidents if we had a gun in every classroom.
Yeah, I would agree. And in part because, you have police officers who are trained for these situations, and many of them react poorly and are afraid. Imagine putting a weapon into a teacher's hands who is not trained for this. This isn't something they deal with on a daily basis. In fact, you may be trained and it might be 20 years before something happens. And you think that teacher is going to know how to handle things and know what to do and not be scared out of their mind about everything? And to think that they're supposed to be able to handle a situation like that when police can't even handle a situation like that a lot in many cases. So my thought is why don't we do something like we do for banks? Why don't we have a button under the teacher's desk or something that alerts the police and locks the doors immediately, locks your doors so that you're secured immediately? I go, that to me seems like such a much more reasonable, choice than arming people who with guns who may not even want to hold a gun, let alone learn how to shoot one. So
I think that there is, I don't care what you're talking about, whether it's putting guns in teachers' hands or installing something like your example, it all comes down to funding. Can the schools afford it?
Oh, they
Really,
can, yeah, they can afford it. Listen, if there's something this government knows how to do is that they know how to find the funds whenever they want to. And if the kids are important enough for them, they'll find the funding. And
but
so
are they? That's the
yeah,
question.
that's just it.
That's where we're at, is because are kids even important right now? I'm very lucky. I'm very, very lucky. My kids have one-to-one Chromebooks. We have access to pretty much anything we need. I bet you my school probably has already thought about installing things like that. I know they have.
I will
Okay.
tell you this, if you, especially since you said that your school deals with more affluent students,
Yes.
I would go to the parents and go, look, we're not going to be able to get all the funding from city or from county or whatever. And would you be willing? And I can assure you, as parents who have money, they would say, if it's going to keep my kids safe, yes, we'll chip in. And so if we do things even on a local level and approach parents and people who are wealthy in their communities to participate and donate to this cause. And again, I know that, even in where I live, God knows how many schools we have in our county, but it's a ridiculous number. But I can't help but think that they would be willing to help pony up some money to protect these
Right.
children.
Here's the issue. And like I was saying, our school, we're about to build a brand new high school. They're gonna have those fail safes in the new high school. I already know that. Okay, those aren't the schools we're talking about though. We're talking about the inner city schools. We're talking about the low income schools. The families are low income as well. Those are the schools we're talking about. We already have issues where those low income schools don't have they don't have the funding for their kids to fix a whiteboard that the teacher hasn't had in 3 years, and they have to figure out a way around it. They don't have the funding for books. They just don't have the funding that they need, even for the education, let alone for the protection. And then we have such a disparity in the country when it comes to education, and that's a problem.
Yeah, well, I always thought it was messed up the way we funded schools through, through the taxes of homes, and so if you live in a more affluent area, you get taxed more. So of course your schools are nicer and everything, and then the poor neighborhoods don't get the same funding because they're
But that's their argument.
yeah,
Their argument is we moved to this area because we want a good school district.
right,
I
exactly.
mean, that's the argument. And so that's the country we live in. I mean, that's what you get with a capitalist society. So
Right. So with your students, is this ever an issue with them? Do they ever come to you? Have you ever talked to your students? Have they ever wanted to talk to you about, hey, what do we do if something happens and I feel anxious about this, or, I'm scared, and where you've had to, maybe calm them down and reassure them?
I actually have never had a situation where the kids are scared. They have been curious about whenever a new shooting happens and they come in talking about it, and they're like, what would we do? Like, what would happen? What would we have to do? And there's a lot of, the one big thing that we try to tell our students is if something like that does happen, I actually am in a safe room. And if you, in the video, you can see right behind me that there's actually, my window shut completely. I've got it's bulletproof, that will drop. So, and I can get my windows to do that. My door is also bulletproof. So if I shut my door and I can lock it, we're good. I mean, we'll be fine in my classroom. But what happens if somebody does come into our classroom before we have that chance? What do you do? And the kids, we tell our kids, pick up the heaviest, biggest object you can, and all 30 of you throw it at them at the same time.
And then
I mean, huh?
and then jumping.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I had a teacher that I worked with, and we talked about this one time, and he had said that he heard from a police officer, the best place for the teacher to be in a classroom, if you're afraid that somebody's going to come in with a gun, what's the first thing that's going to come in the room? The gun,
Right.
not the person. So if you hide right by the door where they can't see you yet, you can grab, it might be hot, but you can grab that gun as they walk in the room. And so, and if kids are throwing heavy objects at them at the same time, that might be the best shot you have.
Right. Or just, I wouldn't necessarily say grab, because I mean, especially, well, you're a different story, because I know that you're particularly strong, but a lot of women aren't nearly as strong as men. And so you grab it and they're just going to break away and then shoot you. I would say grab something that you can like just hit their hand so hard and break their hand that the gun falls out. But that's where I go back to, if you had a button the way banks do, where it would lock that door automatically, like, and I think too, the school should have some sort of alarm system that is just for this particular instance, just like in the Midwest, they have the tornado alarms, something like that, to go, hey, danger is approaching, and you push that button, the doors are locked, and the kids, get, go to the corner of the classroom or wherever they're told to go. And
we have drills for this. We have shelter in place.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you practice these drills? Because I know when I was a kid, this was back during the Cold War still, and Cuba had just gotten missiles. And so we were taught, like, if the alarm sounds, get under your desk, like that was going to save us or something. So,
or like the tornado drills where you put your biggest book over your head.
Right. Yeah. So exactly.
We have 3 drills that we practice regularly, and we have to do them once every quarter. And it is the shelter in place, the tornado drill. Oh, 4, sorry. Shelter in place, intruder on campus, tornado drill, and fire drill. We have to do all 4 of those once every quarter. So the kids understand, they know what we have to do. Shelter in place and intruder on campus are pretty much the same. You shelter in place, we can continue working, we can continue doing our thing, we just have to lock the door. Fire drill, we go outside, obviously. Tornado, we have 4 safe rooms in this building and 4 in the other building, and so the other 4 classroom, we go 2 classrooms to a room, and we drop our windows, and that's how that works. And then our intruder on campus. Our intruder on campus, we lock the door, and everybody has to stay completely silent. I drop the windows. And also they send out, we have a teacher only, it's like a text message app that they will send out updates to us so that we know what's going on outside the doors, which I think is very important. We've had a couple of incidences, not particular at my school, but at the other campus, the high school campus, they have done where they've had intruder on campus, where it's never been anything serious. It's a student brought a gun in their trunk of their car to school or something. And so we'll do we'll do an intruder on campus, and everybody has to stay quiet. And then they send out messages to us to update us what's going on and when we can open our doors again. So,
it's so strange because, again, I go back to when I was a child or a kid, a teenager. And I remember at our high school, and again, mind you, yes, this was back in the dark ages. It was, but I remember guys coming to school in their pickup trucks with rifles and shotguns in the back of their truck with on the gun racks, because they were hunters. And so, they would leave school and go right out to meet their dad to go hunting for the weekend during hunting season. And it was never a thought. No one ever thought, like, if you get in a fight, hey, let's bring a gun and shoot each other. It was never a consideration back in those days. And so, while I think that, we have access to weapons that are unnecessary, like military style weapons, which, I love when the Republicans love to say, oh, an AR-15 is not a military style weapon. It is. It's an M16 that just isn't fully automatic, is all it is. It's an M16 that's not fully automatic. And
not necessary for hunting.
Right. It's not. Yeah. If you're that bad of a shot, you shouldn't be hunting. If you need to fire that many rounds. And so, but the weapon isn't the underlying problem. The underlying problem is that society's changed since I was a kid, and not for the better, obviously. And so we want to keep, pushing that off, and we don't want to do anything about it. We don't want to address it. We want to kind of sweep that under the rug and and every time we have a shooting, we go, well, what's the problem? And no one ever wants to really address the real problems that we're having, because it's, I don't know if there's just no money to be made in it or whatever, because that's what it always seems to come down to. It's like, oh, if we can address this problem, we can make money, then let's go ahead and do it. But if we can't make money, we don't want to put anything into it. So,
Yeah. I go back to social media. I think that is, I love social media for what it is, for what it was designed for. I use it myself. It keeps me up to date with the people that I've lived all over the country, and I love to be able to follow the people, see their families grow, and watch people change and grow. It keeps me connected to people that I would have never been able to stay connected with if it weren't for social media. But kids abuse social media, and TikTok, Snapchat, two of the worst apps
right.
For trying to monitor a child. There's no way to, it's very, very difficult if you allow your child to have those apps to monitor what they're doing and what they're seeing and what they're being exposed to. And I think it's causing a lot of issues.
Yeah. And again, back in my day, if there was any type of bullying, it ended after school. Like, you were gone from school, you didn't have to deal with it until the next day. Now
it's worse.
It
gets
it's
worse.
constant, because it's now they can attack you at home over your phone or your computer.
Yeah.
And it's relentless. And so
At school now, they don't bully as much at school because teachers are right there looking over them all the time. So why would they do that when they can do it at home?
Right.
Because I've had kids come up to me and say, I can't sit next to that person, they bully me. I'm like, I've never seen it. What's not here? They're doing it over Snapchat, and Snapchat causes probably 99% of the drama that walks into my classroom. And
Really?
It's because, yeah, and kids don't text anymore. They don't use the text message function on their phone. They Snapchat to each other. That is how they speak, because it deletes, and their parents can't see what they're talking about.
That's right. And I would say it's not just social media. I think it's a culmination of things, such as the music they listen to nowadays, the movies they watch, the video games they play. And I always find it on the left disingenuous when they balk at that whole idea. Oh, they want to believe it on video games. Well, I'm sorry, but when you have games that that you can shoot police officers in the face and go through it as if it's nothing, or shoot citizens in the face, and you're playing these violent games, you can't compare it to Bugs Bunny dropping an anvil on someone's head, because it's not even close. Because one is obviously a cartoon that's not realistic, and another one is as realistic as they can possibly make it, or just about so. And so there's this desensitizing, I believe, that goes on when you hear words and lyrics that that just sensitizes you to everything.
So I'm going to address it one thing at a time here. So the first thing, the music. Where does the music come from? Where do the kids know that it's a popular song that they need to listen to? It's TikTok. Every kid, every single song that becomes popular on the radio now is a TikTok trend. So again, back to social media on that one. All right. So, and you go through your For You page on TikTok, these kids are scrolling through, and every other song is awful songs. And I can hear it. I hear my 8-year-old niece, and I have to go in there and say, no, that's not okay. But because that's what she sees on that social media page. As for movies, I think movies have been the same for years. I mean, I think that there are some differences when it comes to the opinions in movies now. You have Netflix, and that's what they're watching. And that's another thing. It's hard to monitor. What are they watching? What are they seeing? I find that in my opinion, some of those shows are a lot worse than others. So, even when it seems like it's like gory and gross, I think that that's a lot, in a lot of ways, I think that's actually better than some that are just more opinionated and pushing opinions on kids. Now, as for the last thing, the video games. Yeah. So when it comes to video games, I think that it's very important, if you allow your child to play video games, that they understand the difference between reality and fantasy. Because I've played video games my entire life and I know the difference. And I can go and play Grand Theft Auto and I have no issues with that. Like, I can play that. I don't like it personally. That's not my game, but I can play that game. And I don't think that it doesn't make me respect police officers less because I just shot. It's fantasy. It's completely fake. But there are children out there that can't see the difference, and they have a difficult time knowing that where that line is. And I think that is our job as parents, is to be able to see if our child is one of those kids that can't see the line. And I think that it's a kid by kid basis as to whether you allow them to watch horror films. I know parents that say, no, I have one kid that can watch scary movies and I have another one that can't. Because you have to know your kids. And that's the problem. Social media is raising our kids. Right. Kids spend 17 hours a day on their phones and on iPads instead of out with their parents, learning from their parents. They're learning from strangers.
Well, not only that, but again, I'm going to sound like the old boomer that I am, but it's like back in my time.
I always sound like an old person.
We used to go outside and play ball.
Yes.
We used to be with real friends, not friends over the internet. We were friends who gathered together and played together and socialized together and learned to be social with one another, learn how to be able to be sociable to one another so that we weren't socially inept in society when we go out and not know how to talk to people. And every time, and again, I might be wrong about this because I every time I've ever seen a shooter, it's almost always that this kid was a loner. Like, and so like you had a family, so you could play Grand Theft Auto and you didn't feel alone. You weren't pissed off at the world. People weren't bullying you to where you didn't have any outlet or any way to get help. You had people around you that loved you and showed you love, and because you came from a family. But imagine a kid who doesn't have siblings. His parents are at work and he's by himself. He gets picked on, and this rage just builds and builds, and they fall through the cracks because we don't, no one knows or no one cares to look and see if this kid is hurting. And so I think that's part of the issue as well. So you're right. It's not the game necessarily, because there are kids who can play it, but I always liken it to this, and people might think this is a bad analogy, but I feel very comfortable driving my car at over 100 miles an hour. I know my abilities as a driver, and I know I'm much safer at 100 miles an hour than a lot of people are at 55. Yet the speed limits are not set for people who have these extraordinary abilities when they drive. They're set for the standard of people, what most people can handle.
What's safe when there's a lot of traffic on the road and people have to, yes.
Right, exactly. And so here's the thing. When I grew up, there was no Netflix. So there were ratings on movies. So if there was a particularly violent movie, you had to be 18 or older to be able to get into that movie. You didn't have access to it. But now with Netflix and other streaming services out there, these kids
you're exposed to all of it.
Everything. And it's just, and I don't think, like you said, I just don't think it's a good thing. And especially when you can use Snapchat for such nefarious reasons as to bully someone so that you can't get caught with what you're telling them or saying to them. And it's just, it's a very difficult time for kids and for teachers, I think.
Parents.
I'm
Absolutely.
so glad my kids are grown. That's all I got to say. I'm glad that, I somehow got to miss all of this nonsense. So, You have a difficult job, and I think that teachers deserve more respect than they get, and
Thank you.
certainly more money than you get. So
Yes.
I want to ask you one last question pertaining to these type of kids who are alone and stuff. Are there any type of procedures that kids can go through to report someone who might be a concern and say, hey, Miss Tiffany, I just want to let you know that so and so was saying this, or talking about this, or I saw
Well,
this.
and this,
Yeah.
yeah, and this is actually where technology is a great thing. We have an app at our school, and I know a lot of other schools use it, that it is completely anonymous, and you can report, and it goes straight to the principal. So the principal gets these messages from students where they can report anonymously anything that they might know could be happening, and then the principal can follow up with it. And the principal is obligated to follow it. They have to by our policy. So if anybody reports anything on that app, it has to be followed up on.
That's I mean, that's great news. I know that there's a possibility of it being taken advantage, like if you want to get back at somebody and you put their name out there, and
it happens.
right, and kids will do that from time to time, but I think it's worth going through to check to make sure, so that we can prevent something like this happening in the future, where more innocent people need to die, or needlessly die, and for no reason. So,
and this app is great because that's not the only thing they report on it. They can report if somebody has suicidal ideations. They can report basically anything that they feel that the school needs to know about. They can report it completely anonymously, and nobody knows.
okay, that's great. All right, so I want to ask you one more question. What do you think? Actually, I got a couple more, but this is one of them that's coming from me particularly. So what do you say to people who like me, who say, well, I'm never going to use that math that you teach. What do I need to learn it for?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say this because, I mean, you laugh about it, but literally we hear it every
I imagine by people like me.
every year. What do we say? Well, last year I had one student in particular that was really adamant about it and would ask me all the time. But typically what we say right at the very beginning, the first kid that asks it, and we say, you may never use this, and that's okay. All right. So math, what we teach you in math in high school isn't so that you know how to do the math. Math teaches you critical thinking skills. That's what it teaches you. It teaches you how to solve a problem. And we try to implement that as much as possible in our classrooms at this school anyway. So yes, we teach you how to solve the equations, and we teach you how to solve a quadratic, but we also try to look at real life situations and try to get you to understand how you might use these critical thinking skills that we're teaching you. These because kids don't have that, adults have that, right. And adults wonder where they learned it.
Yeah. What a brilliant, that's a brilliant answer.
Experience. They learned it from experience, and that's what we're doing by teaching them the math in high school. And if all else fails and they are like, why do I need this? You need it to graduate high school. Right. You need it to get your diploma. Just get it done and move on. Okay. I had one kid, very, very intelligent kid, straight A student. And he asked me all the time, when are we ever going to use this? And I would try to placate him and explain, well, you could use it for this or this. And eventually I just came up to him very quietly and I said, listen, you asking this question every day makes the other students question me. Okay. So I need you, this becomes a problem when you are riling up other students to believe that they don't have to learn from me. Okay. And then I lose control of my classroom. And he looked at me and he said, okay, I will never ask you again. And he didn't. So sometimes it's just, you just have to kind of.
Yeah, it's sort of that, like what my mom used to tell me. She would tell me I have to do something. I go, why? And she would say, because I said so. That's why.
And I don't like to be that person. That is the last, I think I've used that phrase maybe once. but I try not to. I try to explain to them, this is where you might use this,
Right.
but you may never use it. I have a colleague that does that. She said, when a kid's like, when am I ever going to use this? You probably won't. That's what she says. You probably won't. But
If you want to graduate.
you got to graduate. You got to learn it anyway. So
Exactly. Well, that usually gets kids that fall in line. So, I'm going to give you the parting words for if you have the floor. So, anything you'd like to say to parents, anything you'd like to say to students, anything you'd like to say to both of them, or other teachers, anybody out there, what would you like to say to any of them, if anyone?
ooh, that's tough. I think as a whole, I just want parents and students to know that most, and I can't say all, most teachers have the child's best interest at heart. They do. I know that we talked about woke teachers. Some woke teachers, they don't, in their mind, they have their child's best interest at heart. I'm not saying that what they're doing is right, but when a parent comes to a teacher and they complain about whatever's happening in their classroom, the teacher really, for the most part, there are the teachers that just sit back and relax and do absolutely nothing and just let their kids sit there. And I think especially math teachers that tell their kids that they can't ask questions, I think that's completely unacceptable. You have your bad teachers, just like any other profession. There's bad teachers, but the majority of the time, the teachers have the child's best interest at heart and they want the child to succeed, at least in my experience and with the people I work with. So I think that that's just important for people to know.
That's a great message. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your thoughts and your opinions and taking time out to spend with us. And I hope that there are people out there, students and parents, who listen to what you had to say. And I hope you have a great school year, and you guys stay safe and teach that math.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Friends, thanks for joining us today. And again, a great thanks to Miss Tiffany here for joining us. And until next time, take care, be safe, and love yourself so you can love others. Bye.